Herzlich willkommen zu unserem 23. Kinotalk. Mein Name ist Jule Bartram, ich gehöre zum Leitungsteam der Deutschen Filmakademie und freue mich sehr auf diesen Abend mit euch. Wir haben ein Gespräch vor uns mit Enrique Sánchez Lansch, Vorstand Dokumentarfilm, wird das Gespräch führen mit Geeta Gandbhir und wir freuen uns sehr auf den Abend und switchen jetzt in English. Enrique, the stage is yours.
Good evening to everybody, and good evening especially to our guest of honor, Geeta Gandbhir, the wonderful filmmaker and director of this great film, The Perfect Neighbor. Good evening, and thanks for joining this and sharing your time with us.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me.
So we really loved your film very much, and on one hand, it obviously touches very, very important issues, but in the same time, it's such an innovative film, telling the story using material that I can't remember having ever seen in this way used. So my first question goes into or touches the area when you started to decide to make this film, which is not such a long time ago, because the film treats events only of 2022 and 2023. So it's rather recent events. Did you know already that you would be able and that you would eventually use to such extent the footage of body cams and security footage, etc.?
No, so thank you again so much for having me in this question. And this is, I just want to say it's a big honor for me to be talking to all of you. So this film, I never set out to make a film about this topic, but there is a personal connection to this story, which is that Adjika Owens, who was the young mother who unfortunately was murdered in the film, as you see, was a family friend. So this story came to me because of that. So my sister-in-law was Adjika's best friend. So we got a call the night that Adjika was murdered. Myself and my partner, who is also my husband, Nakan Kwantu, he's a producer on this film. The night that we lost Adjika, there was a phone call that came to us, and we immediately were on the ground trying to help the family. But really, our job became that of being sort of a media liaison for the family, because the news was not covering it. It was only very local news that might be telling the story, but it was not national news. And we knew that with cases like this, the media coverage is everything. The attention that it gets drives law enforcement to actually do something. Without that coverage, we felt that, again, Susan might go free. And I think part of that, too, is because there is this law that exists in about 38 states in the US called Stand Your Ground. Interestingly, I found that it also exists in places in Europe. There is a version of it in France, too, and it falls under the Castle Doctrine. In the US, it's called the Castle Doctrine. In France, I believe it's Castile. But the idea is that you have the right, if you feel your life is in imminent danger, you have the right to use deadly force to defend yourself without having the duty to retreat. And in Florida, there have been other cases. Maybe most famously, there was a case of Trayvon Martin, and that his case sparked protests around the world. The perpetrator of his murder walked free. So about 2 months after we became involved in trying to help, we were shooting some things on the ground, but really to share with the news and for social media. And so that is, again, just to try to keep the case alive. And 2 months after Adjika was shot, we got the police body camera footage from the lawyers. So the lawyers who were working on the case sent it to myself and Nakan and said, can you go through this they sent us a thumb drive. It was literally on a thumb drive that we plugged into our computer and said, it's a mess. It's the all the evidence the police had from the case, but we cannot make heads or tails of it really. And it's a lot. So can you look through this and see if there's anything we can use for the media or maybe that will help the case. So we started to go through it, and it was not organized in any way. There was footage from the Ring camera, that was the doorbell camera. There was footage from the police, the body camera footage. There was dash cam footage, again, from the cars. There was audio calls from Susan, but also from the community who, called the police. And there were detective interviews. So and it was just all thrown on this drive. So I used to be an editor. So I managed to piece it all together in a timeline. It took me a couple of weeks of doing this at night and pieced it together to see the chronology of what happened. And we had to synchronize the body camera footage, because there were always multiple police on scene. So you have one person's footage, one person's camera, and they would turn it on. It starts at this time. Another person comes, their camera starts at this time. Then they shut it off. So we were, again, putting this together. I would say I was really the assistant editor on this project, because that was my job, and I strung it all out. And then I realized the footage went back 2 years, meaning it had begun 2 years before the murder, because Susan called the police to the scene so frequently. And that's when I thought that maybe there is more here. Maybe we could do something more with this, and maybe we could make a film.
Wow, that's a great journey. Yeah. But one thing is that you got the footage through your lawyers because they were considered evidence. The other thing is to be able to use them for a film. How did the police react?
Sure. So what's very interesting. So again, they were not my lawyers per se. They were the lawyers for the family. Yeah. So Benjamin Crump is a very famous civil rights attorney here. So he is one of the people who, and then Anthony Thomas works with him, and he was on the ground in Florida. And so it came through them. But interestingly, there's the Freedom of Information Act exists here. So you can basically file a request to the police department, and they are required to release the footage. It's something that, any of us could have done. But I think in this case, sometimes they do not want to release the footage, so they can make it very difficult, or they can stall, or who knows what can happen. In this case, I don't know the details because it wasn't me who did it, but the footage came pretty quickly. So I imagine the police department was cooperative. So that is how it came. And once the footage is released, it's public record. So it belongs to the people. So again, anyone could have accessed it. It exists as public record, and you can search it, you can find it, you can acquire it. You can ask for a copy of it. So this is how they got it. And in making a film out of it, our requirement was that obviously for the people who are featured in the film, particularly children, it is important to gain consent, right? But we were very much in touch with the community because we were on the ground immediately. So for children and for people who are heavily featured, consent is important, and to get them to sign a release and agree to have their likeness used. As you notice, so in the film, interestingly, there's some very large, strange looking blurs. Those were the police. So interesting, the police are meant, I believe the body camera footage, people's faces were meant to be blurred, but sometimes they were, and sometimes they were not. Mm-hmm. So that is just how the footage came to us. And we went through a process of making sure that everyone who you see, that we got their consent. And if we did not, for example, there were some children we could not locate. And so we also blurred them, but we did it in the same style as the police because we could not change their blurs. So we just, made it identical. So that's how that worked.
Yeah, I thought so, because some were blurred. So I thought, okay, then everybody else gave his or her consent. Yes.
Yeah. And the
Or the
community was
parents
very,
did.
yes, that's right. And the community was very much behind this project because I think, as you see, that was a really, what the body camera footage showed was that was a really beautiful, close-knit community living together, raising children together, taking care of each other. And losing Ajika for them was like losing a family member. They were devastated. And so they felt it was important to share what happened with the world as well. They sort of understood the mission.
And when you decided to really make a film out of it, was it at a moment when Susan was already sentenced, or before?
So before, Susan had been arrested and the trial was pending. So what happened when we decided to make the film is I went to Pamela Dias, who is Ajika's mother. You see her in the film. She's very young, and she had Ajika young at 18. So she and Ajika were they almost grew up together. They were incredibly close, and they were mother and daughter, but they were also best friends. So I went to her and said, I think I could make a film. I have nothing else to offer you. I have no other skills. This is all I know how to do. But I think maybe we could do this. And if we could tell this story as a cautionary tale, and also if to be 100% transparent, I also said to her, I don't have any money to offer you, obviously, but if we sell this, if it goes somewhere, then perhaps the money can go to the children and to you. We can put it into a fund or a trust to pay for college and to pay for whatever is needed, in this, because she was left with 4 kids. Ajika was a single parent, and one of the fathers is now involved. So that has been good. But she really was suddenly left with this responsibility. And she said, yes, she wanted us to make a film. And I think she takes a lot of strength. I don't know if folks here are familiar. There's a story of Emmett Till, but he was a young man, a young African-American man who was murdered during the civil rights movement in the US. Mm-hmm. And his mother, he was brutally lynched, and his mother insisted on an open casket funeral and asked the media to come in and take pictures. This was in the again, many years ago, but said, come in and take pictures and share them. I mean, the world needs to know what happened to my baby. And similarly, this is where I think Pamela gains her strength. And she was like, this is a way to tell this story and put pain to purpose. So, but the trial and Susan being what the outcome of the trial would be never really factored in to the making of the film, because we didn't know when that would happen. So again, we felt that we would go through the film and maybe have a card at the end that said, the trial is pending, or maybe it's happened, or whatever, wherever the status was at that time.
Then you have also footage from the police station, where we can see Susan several times being questioned and ultimately also writing the letter to the kids. Was that also part of that package that you got through the lawyers?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So, did you foresee, if you started to make the film before Susan was sentenced, did you foresee that the outcome could have been completely different?
We honestly, we thought the outcome would be completely different because of what has happened in the past, and with stand your ground laws, because of the racial biases that exist, or just in general, because of the racial biases that exist, unfortunately, here in our country. And I think this is a worldwide phenomenon, and anti-Blackness, right? But we were concerned that she would get off, and it was also really interestingly, the trial took place in Ocala, Florida, in Marion County, that county, and that is where the law "Stand Your Ground" was actually written. It is where that. So it comes out of that County. So, and it was an all-white jury, which, you know, again, does not usually bode well if the you know, again, if there is if racism is a factor in what happened. And so I think that we were astonished, honestly. And I think there was a bit of a spark of hope for us that an all-white jury in Florida, which is one of the most, you know, sort of gut trigger happy and places, and just again where the legislation is always in favor of the gun owner, and law enforcement is often in favor of the gun owner. We were very surprised and felt it was ultimately important to include it, if even in the credits.
Yeah, and you make it very clear, just with that kind of list of degrees of self-defense, of likelihood of self-defense. I mean, when I saw it for the first time, I thought, well, it's so unlikely that she's found guilty, let alone found guilty and sentenced to 25 years. But then ultimately, this is what happened. So just with that, you can feel that most people in her case would get away with it.
Yeah. No, 100%. And it's interesting, my family members were in the courtroom, so they are in that footage. We were not allowed in with the camera. They had there was you know, one camera in the courtroom that was allowed to shoot. But so we were watching from outside, but my family members were in there, and I could see on their faces like how they were just, you know, again, the strain, how they were like, they were really not sure, you know? And so I think for us, it was, we're hoping that it sets a precedent. We're hoping it sets a precedent for people who think, because people are unfortunately emboldened by this law. And there is, one of the ironies of this is self-defense has always been something that you could claim in a court of law here in the US and anywhere in the world. This is true in Europe, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
But why do we need this additional layer of a predatory law that can be abused is really the question. So, and like I said, it's interesting that it doesn't just exist in the US, that it is in other places, in other forms. So it's something to, you know, I feel like there is something to think about too, because it can be weaponized wherever it exists.
And just technically, did you need to get Susan's consent?
No, we did not. We did not, because she was convicted. Ultimately, we did not have. If she had gone free,
yeah,
that might have been different. But or there could have possibly, you know, maybe there could have been some recourse, but no, we did not.
One, I would say, accidental layer of the film is that we as viewers are also aware of the fact of how much data, audiovisual data, are accumulated, are gathered by these body cams. And did you encounter people who eventually, when they saw the film or when they saw scenes from the film, they had never been aware that when they were talking to members of the police, that they were being filmed all the time, that they were constantly recorded?
I think that is something that again, what is so interesting about the way that in the film that people are reacting to the police, right? So you see their behavior accordingly. You know, for example, Ajika is very polite. You know, even the children are the only ones who maybe aren't, you know, are the children in the film, to me, are just you know, so wonderful, because they are fully themselves, you know, in front of the police. But everyone else, of course, is very aware that they are talking to the police. I don't think, because the body camera is fairly innocuous. It looks like it is just a circular device that is here, you know, on the chest. And I don't think people think about it in their initial reactions. I really don't think they do. What's interesting is body camera footage here, but also you see it can be. So I think it is a tool of surveillance, and it is it can be a violent tool of the state, particularly when it comes to vulnerable communities. And so that is something that I think we as as communities that of color, or perhaps communities that are, again, immigrant communities here, can experience it that way. And it is used to criminalize us, to surveil us, to do all these terrible things. What I think was really interesting, what we wanted to do with the body camera footage in this film is subvert the use of it by showing it, by using it to show this community as they were before this terrible incident happened, and show them as full human beings, which I think the police didn't intentionally capture, but they did. They captured the children playing in the street, they, being kids. And oftentimes children, particularly children of color, are adultified, we say, when a crime happens to them. They are, again, there's some justification is looked for. And you see Ajika, again, just being a mother. You see, this is really a community of families. So for us, it was important to take that tool, like I said, and subvert it and try to humanize the community through it. Because after terrible crimes happen to us, we are so often dehumanized. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that with the body camera footage, which again, I have, there's two sides to it. We felt it was important to try to use it differently than it might traditionally be used.
The police officers and their work, it's also I would say an accidental layer of the film that you get a close look into how police officers deal with being called into community and trying to deal with both sides, talk to both sides, and we get an insight into that. And by and large, they come across as very professional people who try to deal with these things professionally and react to both sides and try to help. Was this something that just came out of the material? Did you ever feel that there were moments that you said, well, I don't want to show this because maybe the police doesn't come across that professional as they should, or so? It was really...
Yeah, that's interesting you would ask me that, because actually that's a great question. So the police come up often in this film, and I think what you expect, particularly in the US, is for the police to come in guns blazing, like harming, throwing people to the ground and being violent, because that similarly, that is their, like what we know of the body camera footage, that is the reputation that precedes them. Interestingly, I think what you see in this film is a different take on it, where the police come in and they're polite. They're very young too. They're really young, a lot of them. So they are, and they are polite to the community. But I think the truth is that for us, our expectation of the police is so low, particularly here in the US, that sometimes we mistake politeness and kindness for competence. And I think what happened here is that Susan, again, you have a community that is multiracial. And then there was Susan. And I think what the police did not do is recognize Susan as a threat. And Susan was able to weaponize sort of her privilege, and she constantly weaponized victimhood as well, in a way that befuddled them and did not, and they saw Susan as a client. They treated Susan like a client and treated the rest of the community as people who did not really need protection. They just treated Susan as a nuisance. But Susan's access to a weapon, particularly in Florida, where you can buy a gun like you can buy a microwave oven or a toaster, should have been of concern. And the fact that she called the police so frequently with complaints that were not necessarily criminal complaints should have been a flag. Really, we were told by other law enforcement who had seen the film that by the third time Susan called, she should have been flagged as a problem, and they should have gone out there. Somebody should have done an assessment and spoken to her and say, you are misusing emergency services. This is not what we are, this is not, and you actually are using hate speech against children. You are filming them. You are invading their privacy. You are actually the issue, but because the police bring their own biases to a situation, they didn't see it that way. And it was a preventable problem. I think too, police here are often used as a catch-all for everything. And really, there should have been, had a social worker been called to the scene or someone, again, if it was not a criminal issue and it was a civil issue, then the police could have possibly notified someone else, or and involved. There's so many other avenues that could have been taken, but they just kept telling the community, don't go over there. Don't go over there, even though the community had the right. They were playing in a neighbor's yard. The children were playing in another neighbor's yard where they had the right to be. So I think this is where we see it's a systemic failure. The individual police were kind, but ultimately the worst outcome still happened, which is that Ajika is dead, and they didn't protect Susan from herself. Like, Susan is spending ostensibly the rest of her life in prison because there was a lack of intervention. So I think this is, what we see in the film. And again, I think we were also often so stunned that the police are polite that we don't, that we don't know we take that at face value, but there's sort of deeper layers to it with the situation.
So you think if it hadn't been a white older lady in a community with lots of people of color, their reaction might have been different.
100%. If it had been me making those phone calls, I can tell you, I would have been seen as a threat, or a Black person here. And similarly, there was a scene in the film where you sort of see it culminate, where I think of it as sort of her last stand, where she refuses to get out of the chair that she is seated in, and the police do not know what to do. And in a way, they handle it the way they should. But had that been a person of color, or anybody, a younger person or a person of color in that chair, I assure you that would have gone differently. So their treatment of her was definitely, because of who she was, and how she was positioned in the world. So, and not to say, again, their treatment of everyone should be the way they treated her with, they didn't drag her out of the chair. They didn't, they even, like I said, they didn't immediately arrest her. I mean, they had stand your ground laws, but the way they handled her was with what we say here is like gloves, kid gloves. So I think that ideally they would do that for everyone, but it's not the case. Had it been, to say, an immigrant from another country, had it been anyone else, they would not have been treated that way.
Do you believe that police officers behave differently because they are aware that they are almost all the time under surveillance? That there is a camera that in a certain event can be used and can be watched by somebody else.
And that it is meant to do that. They have found workarounds, of course. I don't know if you see, like, they will beat someone up and say, stop resisting, stop resisting. So there are ways that they have figured out to circumvent the camera. But as you see, they know. There's moments in the film where one of the women goes, and she curses, she's cursing, and then she realizes her camera is on and she shuts it off, So they know, they are, but sometimes and sometimes, like one of the police, they said things they shouldn't have, probably. Like one of them referred to Susan as a psycho, and his camera was on. They didn't, they also, but I think body camera footage ultimately, I think, is really important. It is critical to holding the police accountable. And right now it exists in 8 states in the US, and the powers that be are trying to change that, of course. And so it is important for us to hold on to that. Like without this footage, I don't know what would have happened. The footage was used, obviously, in the trial. So I don't end the calls, etc. So I don't know that Susan would have gotten her, again, the trial would have been the same without it.
What is usually done with all this recorded footage? Is there a certain amount of time, like after a year or after 2, that they are erased, or are they held for eternity?
This I do not know. This I don't know. And it could be different state to state here in the US, but I couldn't answer that properly. I would have to do some research.
But I mean, you were able to go back, I remember, like 1 year from the events when you started.
2 years,
2
about
years.
2 years. Yeah, it was when the first phone call that Susan made happened. It was 2 years. So that is how long that dispute was brewing.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, if you look at it, the from a viewer's perspective, it gives a different feeling of closeness. I mean, it's observational in a new nuance of the word. And I was immediately, without knowing what the whole dramatic arc would be, but a few minutes into the film, I was completely absorbed. Did you? I mean, at what point in the project did you realize that you were touching new territories of storytelling by using this kind of footage?
Sure. So what's very interesting is that for me, I think because it was both investigative work for us, and also in some ways there was grief. I did not ever have, unfortunately, never had the privilege to meet Ajika in person, because I live myself and my family, we live in New York, and then our relatives are in Florida, and that's where she was. So, but I knew how beloved she was, and she was part of their, the extended family. But so I think there was a lot of grief in the making of this film. So for us, because of that, we felt compelled. We had to understand, like, how could this happen? We couldn't believe it ourselves, that like such a trivial dispute could lead to someone picking up a gun, right? And murdering their neighbor. It seemed ridiculous over children playing in a yard nearby. Like, what? How is that possible? But so I think in the process of making the film, I also come from a narrative or a scripted background. My first film was Malcolm X with Spike Lee, who you all may know Spike Lee. So the great Spike Lee. So I came up and worked in the editing room in scripted film for about 12 different scripted films for about 12 years. And I think, so that is my training. And when I saw this, it actually felt to me like a horror film or like a thriller. And the footage played to me like, say, a film like The Blair Witch Project. So to me, it was something that I felt I had seen before, but in scripted films. And what was really interesting too is the police, again, not intentionally, but they functioned like multi-camera, because there was multiples of them on scene, sometimes 10 to 15, with their body camera footage they captured different things. And all of this was, again, this is police evidence. No one was thinking about this being a film when they made it. They were just capturing evidence. But for us, having that, I think that background of a scripted film made me believe that we could live in this body camera footage. Or, also verite filmmakers, like if you have made a verite film, that this might be possible. So, and it was really a struggle. There were times where we felt we were worried about the context. Do we need interviews? But I think I did not want to go back. It was really important to me not to go back and re-traumatize the community who had been through this already. And then they were interviewed by detectives, to go back and re-traumatize them by asking them to relive it again. So we made a commitment, and I had an amazing editor. Viridiana Lieberman, who is honestly again, is a big reason the film is what it is, or just the vision for the film. That was my vision. And even when I wavered, she would stick to it. She was like, no, you said, like, could I be like, oh my God, is this because it, in some ways it felt experimental. And we made it as a very small independent film with, it was a small group of us with no money. And then, so we didn't know what would come of it. And then it got into Sundance, the Sundance Film Festival, which is where, and it premiered there, and and it won a prize. And then Netflix picked it up they picked it up at the festival. But it was, again, in a way, like I said, an experiment. I recognized that it was for a documentary. It might feel experimental, and that I felt I couldn't see doing it any other way. So
congratulations. It's a very innovative, wonderful movie. I could be talking for hours with you, but I want to give everybody else a chance to ask a question. So I open the round. Who has questions? Okay, I think Alice Agnes Kirchner is the first one to ask a question.
Hey Geeta, thanks for the film. I really enjoyed watching it. I'm a documentary filmmaker myself, so my question is, I mean, in Germany, I mean, some policemen have body cams, but I have never heard that anybody was able to use it in a film. Maybe for court, but I don't know. And also in Germany, you're not allowed to film in court, not at all. You're allowed to film at the beginning or at the end, but usually you're not allowed to get any footage of that. So obviously for you, that the law in United States is so differently, made this film possible. I mean, if this would haven't been, do you think at the moment when you came to the site, when you heard of the death of your friend, would you think that you would have made a film without the body cam material?
I don't think so, to be honest. We wanted to do something to get the story out there, but I think, unfortunately, gun violence is very common in the US, and it is we see the story of the aftermath all the time. The grieving family, the funeral, and in a way, I didn't know that would be useful. Like, there's a big thing about, I think part of what we want to do with this film too is hopefully make some change. And I do think this is not just an American story, because this could happen, again, the gun part of it is, but this could happen. And the idea of how we are polarized and taught to fear each other is and again, those fear, Susan's constant, use of fear, right? And that is part of that law, but that is a tool of legislation, and also, when authoritarian governments want to polarize us, that is what they use, right? They use fear. They teach you to fear your neighbor so that they can come in and say, we will protect you, don't worry, and this, right? And then we all know what that leads to. It leads to us tolerating much greater atrocities, right? If you will pick up a gun and solve, because you think you can do that to solve a dispute with your neighbor, and you will accept that, what else will you accept? That becomes the question. So I think the deeper thing to me, there is the obviously the question of guns and that issue that we must deal with in the US, but it goes beyond gun violence. There's the question of us turning on each other and otherizing each other. And if we do that in our neighborhoods, which is the first place we show up in the world, what would we do in the world becomes the question to me. So I do see this as a universal film. And then when we are living in a very dangerous time where we have a lot of authoritarian governments doing terrible things and polarizing us, and again, and trying to turn us on each other. And so I think that this film speaks to also the choices we make as people. Like, how do we show up? What does being the perfect neighbor actually mean? Susan saw herself as that, and then she killed someone. That is the dangerous, slippery slope, right? That we all know. I am the perfect neighbor. They are the problem. That is the danger here. But I don't think without the body camera footage, I felt like a film. There was something we didn't know already, But with this, I think it was the ability to go back in time and see this, again, this beautiful community as they were, and how one outlier and her access to a weapon combined with those things changed everything.
well, the strength of your film definitely is that you stick to the body camera. All what you're saying now comes underlying with it. It doesn't kind of hit me in the face, but it definitely hits me in the face all the time. But you don't do it as a film director, as in the story, in the editing. So I think it's a very well, everything came together, and it almost looks like it was meant for you to make this film. So I'm happy that you made it. Congratulations on that. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. It definitely was not. So I don't know, like it definitely was a challenge, my poor editor. And like to sort through it all and try to make it into something, because it was, we joke, this is terrible, but at a certain point you have to joke to survive, right? When you're making this type of work. And my editor would be like, should we call the police department and tell them their shooting is terrible? Like that they need to we call them and ask them why they didn't hold on that shot. And I was like, your production value is terrible. Your sound is bad. The sound was a disaster. The sound was not meant for, of course, like barely you can. So I had my poor post-production team, my sound designer was just like, what were you doing? And I was like, we weren't there. Like it wasn't us. So this was, this is something like, as you see some subtitles, we had to burn it. We had to leave because you couldn't hear it, you just could not. So, but thank you for that. That means so much to me because it was truly a struggle.
Wenn jemand eine Frage hat,
I think,
meldet sich.
yeah, I see one question.
I would love to ask a question.
Sure.
Thank you so much for making this possible. I would love to talk a bit more about the editing, because the decision to place the ending at the beginning is very clever and striking, not just in terms of storytelling, because also it shapes the viewer's emotional trajectory. Maybe you can talk a bit more about what motivated you to that structural choice.
Sure. So I think it's interesting. The beginning was one of the few things that was a little bit contentious with my team. So Viri and I had created two beginnings, and one of them I wanted to start in a way that I felt was much more which I felt was much more subtle and maybe honestly a nod to all of you, maybe more a European sensibility of filmmaking. I wanted to start with the drone down and the police. You hear the police talking underneath and knocking on doors. That would have been the beginning of the film to me. And that's what I wanted. And then my editor, we made another opening that was as you see it now. And so of the two, there was back and forth between my producing team and myself about which one to use. And I wanted the slow burn where you don't give much away, where you just are listening and seeing the footage of the community. So that is footage we shot actually after the fact. After we realized we were making the film, we went back and shot some of that B-roll. You see, some of it is the police, is their footage, but some of it is ours to just sort of give context also so we could use the interviews under it. As you can see, they won. they won that battle, but they outvoted me. But they were also like, Geeta, you want to hold the viewer right away. You want to catch them right away. And your very slow introduction is not going to fly, is not as strong. So it was my team that made me happen. One day I will have my director's cut and I will have my version, but they felt that you needed the audience to be we wanted this to play like a thriller and for the audience to be on the edge of their seat, and to lean into the discomfort of what was happening. And so they felt that intro did that. And I mean, I cannot fault them. The film it got into Sundance with that intro. So here we are, but I still, every director has their thing that they feel they wish they were right about. And that was mine. I would have preferred the other introduction.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Hi, Geeta, thank you very much for the film. I think I watched it a second time. And for me, it's just like, even as a Black woman, it's just ridiculous just to see a beautiful community and just to have one person moving into a people of color community, which I asked myself, why did she move there if she's not so happy to be there?
Yeah.
And it's just to complain about the kids who are allowed to be on the yard. And I think she was also one of the few one who owned the house, and the others just rented a house. I wasn't really sure. Maybe I just misunderstood it.
She did not own the house. She did not.
Oh, she did not. Okay,
They're all
okay.
rentals.
Okay. So yeah. I thought, I don't know, sometimes you have so many thoughts going through your head if this was already on purpose and planned with this racial bias, because why would you move to a district which is not really yours, right? But that's a different question. The question I wanted to ask is, at the end, after she left, after the police escorted her out, and she wrote why she did it or what she wants for the family, and then the policeman officer read. Was it on purpose for yeah? Was it on purpose for you, for the audience, or do they do that?
No, so again, there was no film being made at that time. That is just their police procedure. We were not there. So as you know, that was all the footage. And it's funny, I find that is honestly, the part of the film that to me is the most kind of incredible, is that they take, and we let it play long because I wanted the audience to experience all of the sort of, first there's the discomfort and of watching them try to get her out of the chair, right? Her not refusing, and like I said, sort of having this last moment, which is also heartbreaking. I have to say, there is Susan, again, had this been prevented, Susan also, I'm not a fan of anyone being in prison, and the idea that Susan, to her life is ruined. Everyone's life is ruined, right? And hers as well. So that scene of the chair is kind of heartbreaking and ridiculous and all the things, right? And then you see the police and people in the theaters, and I know I do, people laugh and then they're angry, and there's so many feelings for that moment. And then when they finally remove her, we are left wondering what she wrote. And we didn't know when we were watching it ourselves, we were like, are we going to know? Like, are they going to tell? Like, is anybody, that pad is just there. Don't they want it? Like, they don't know what she wrote. And then he came back and read it, but they read it for the camera. So there's a camera there recording the whole thing, which is the footage we received. And they said they read it for, it's their procedure, so that they can, in case the pad gets lost, right? In case the piece of paper, somebody rips it up or something happens to it, it's recorded. So that is their procedure. So, but I thought it was incredible. Like and it almost was, he didn't mean to do that. There was nobody thinking about a film. He was just doing his process as a investigator, but there was something so cinematic about that. I just wanted us to all sit in it, the way that I had experienced it. And to have that final cathartic payoff of him reading it, and then leaving the room. And I'm obsessed with the chair. I'm obsessed with that chair.
Me too. I was totally, yeah. I had
that chair. I think about how many people have sat in it and what like everything that has happened in that room. So that it's so evocative. I found it so evocative. So that is
I found it very strong, because comparing the scene before, when she was picked up by her sister, when she felt so free and so at ease and was so sure she's not going to end up in prison. And that's what happened with me when I was watching this share scene. I also saw this other picture, and so I was really, I thought the family can be very proud of you to have you, because
thank you.
And be also lucky to have you, because most families do not have someone from the film side to bring it out, to bring their stories out. So thank you for the film. Yeah.
No, thank you. That means so much to me. And to be honest, like I said, the family, they are the reason we did this, just trying to do, and I'm so grateful. They have sort of, with that, we have them as well. Like, it is 100% a two-way street, because they sort of gave me the film was in some ways, and I share this with you all, but it was in some ways cathartic for me. It was therapeutic to make this film. Like I said, I have no other skill. If I was a writer, maybe I would have written a book, but this is all I know how to do. And honestly, when you mentioned the family, when we finished the film, before we sent it to Sundance, I shared it with Ajika's mother. I shared it with Pamela and said, this is what I made, and you decide what happens to it. We can proceed, we can toss it in the dustbin. We don't have to, this is your daughter's legacy, even though she's not in the footage much. It's this, really, I think she's represented through her children, the community, and what you see of her. But I was like, do you want this out there? And if not, forget it. Like, we can put it away and it can never see the light of day. And she said, yes. So they are so brave. She is the bravest person I know. And so, and again, we didn't know what would happen with it, but now it is, because of the distribution that it has had, it is everywhere. So her life is no longer private in a way, but I will share this with you all very quickly. It's a story she always tells, but she tells a story because she and Ajika were so close, they talked every day. And Ajika was a young woman who had big dreams. She had a big personality. She was really like a joyful, vibrant person, very funny. And she wanted to be an entrepreneur. She had all these sort of ideas about how she would, be this very successful, renowned entrepreneur. And she'd call her mother every day and tell her. And her mother would laugh sometimes, as mothers do, like at her stories and, or at her plans. And one of the last things she said to her mother was, she said, wait, she said, okay, Mom, fine. You laugh, but you wait. One day the whole world is going to know my name. So for us, that is what we are left with. And I think that's what her mother is left with. And so, forgive me, it makes me emotional to tell this story, but so for her mother, I think the film being out in the world the way it is means so much more. So forgive me, I didn't think that I would cry. I don't often cry.
No, we can fully understand. It's a very emotional story about a very emotional film, but some very important events.
Thank you all so much for watching it, though.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been
Elrun
great.
haben wir noch Zeit für
we
eine
have
Frage?
One
Elrun?
last question, yes.
Of course.
Thank you so much. I mean, we can feel how strong this movie is in your life. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. So I would like to know how this film changed the life of the mother and of the community. So how's the reaction of the world, and how do they live now?
Sure. So I think one of the amazing things that happened with the release of the film is that with Netflix licensing the film, there was a fee that came in, and we were able to. So when we originally made this film, and I talked about, I said to her, and again with independent film, you never know what's going to happen. It could possibly, like I had said, it could possibly end up on YouTube, if we are lucky, or maybe nowhere. So I was very clear about the expectations that they should have, and they still trusted me and wanted to do that, and said it doesn't matter, we should try. With the film being picked up, we were able to give the majority of the money. We had to pay our team, and we had and folks who had invested in the film. After paying them back, we were able to give the lion's share, or the majority of the money, to the family. So that has helped them in terms of stability, because basically, so Pamela Dias was able to, she had to relocate from where she lived to, and then inherited 4 kids. She was able to basically take a moment to, first of all, to figure out her own life, and without worrying about the finances. they were able to acquire a new home for themselves and the kids that helped. She was able to pay for schooling and therapy and sort of restart a life with them. So I think the film has helped them in that way. Again, there is nothing replaces their mother, but the idea that they have some respite, I think, and when these sort of things happen, people are unprepared for, like, there were legal bills to pay. There were security concerns. When it first happened, the family received death threats, which is so insane.
Yeah.
But I think there are people in the world who wish, who sort of take advantage of this to do strange things. So those things were able to help them. And then also too, for Pam, she has said that it has been therapeutic for her because grief is isolating. And that is what she has told us, that her grief, oftentimes when you lose someone this way, you feel you are alone in it. But seeing audience responses, your responses, even, she has come with us to screenings and been able to talk to audiences, and it makes her feel that she is not alone. That's sort of an idea for capacious grief, that others share in it and recognize it and see her. It makes her feel that she is not, she has said, I don't feel crazy, like I am alone in my head. I see that society cares. And I think that means so much to her.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geeta. Thank you for your time. Thank you for giving us this very precious insight into this wonderful film that you've done. We wish you best of luck with it and with your future projects, and can't wait to see more of the trajectory of this film, and that it hopefully contributes to making things a little easier somehow.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. And I think your interest in it means so much to me, obviously to the family, and just the idea that there is a global, maybe we're hoping we can start a global movement about what it means to be a good neighbor. Some young people have done that on TikTok. So that is an interesting thing, that it has made it to TikTok. And they are saying, no, being a good neighbor means letting the kids play with your basketball hoop. It means, helping your neighbor with this or that, or, so I think that is what we hope for, is that we can push back against things that would divide us, the powers that be that would divide us. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Geeta.
Bye
And
bye.
thanks, Enrique.
Bye bye.
Einen schönen Abend euch allen.